y'all. I get around. Ooh, maybe that wasn't the best way to say that. But I bet I have your attention, don't I? This is the Fight Right podcast. I'm your host, Carla Hoke. I am very blessed to be a guest on, on podcasts pretty often. And there are a few on which I'm a regular, one of which is with RealmMakers. Look them up, RealmMakers, RealmMakers, They hold an annual writing conference for writers of speculative fiction, which is all the weird and wonderful stuff, i.e. sci-fi, fantasy, steampunk, alternate history, dystopian, etc., etc. They are a group near and dear to me because they were the very first folks to give me a platform way back in 2015, I think it was 2015, on teaching fighting to writers. I teach at the RealmMakers Writers Conference pretty regularly. 4 years I think I've taught, and the 1 year I didn't teach, I was still present as a writing mentor. So I love all the Realmies at RealmMakers, and I'm incredibly grateful to them. They are a huge, wonderfully weird blessing. RealmMakers regularly interviews folks in the writing industry on their CrowdCast channel. I have a monthly gig called Pick a Fight with Carla, and this episode of the Fight Right podcast is a recording from my first CrowdCast episode with RealmMakers. This was back in October of this year, which is 2020. Dear heavens, if you're future people, if you're listening, oh, my bad, I have microphone problems. Future people, if you're going back in the past, don't go to 2020. Just 2019's okay. Don't just skip 2020, okay? 0 stars. 0 stars for 2020, thumbs down. Now, I've edited out a few things from the recording in the interest of time. Also on CrowdCast, we can see one another, and we will refer to that during the conversation, and also the writers message the group as well. This is the sort of thing I do at writers' conferences. I meet one-on-one with writers, and they ask me questions. I never know what questions I'm going to get, especially with speculative fiction writers. I think the first one I answer in the CrowdCast episode is about water beings, beings that live in water, fighting. Then I go into aerial fighting, using energy wings, yes, really, fighting children, and mystical beasties. These are all questions given to me on the spot. I didn't prepare for them. Just bear that in mind. The episode is hosted by Lisa Gedfrides, whom I love dearly. Check her out. Lisa, she goes by Lisa Godfreys. Look her up, LisaGodfrees.com. She's pretty great. Before we jump in, check out my blog at FightRight, FightWrite.net. If you subscribe, you will get a discount code for my class with Writer's Digest University. 3 things to consider before you write your fight scene. And of course, check out my book with Fight Right, FightWrite. It's 2 different words there. How to Write Believable Fight Scenes, published with Writer's Digest / Penguin Random House. Okay, that's it. Here we go. Oh, also, this has been edited for time because we had a few technical difficulties and we had to wait for people to come in. So, just so you know, there may be a little bit of jumping around, but you're going to get all the good info. Okay, now let's jump in.
Hello, everyone from RealmMakers. Welcome to our first RealmSphere member event. I'm your host, Lisa. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you for having me.
So, what's going on with you?
Oh, living the dream. Same old writing and training.
All right, so let's go ahead and get to this.
Okay.
Sophia, are you here? I don't know if she's here. She's got our first question, and I would invite her on screen if she wanted to answer it.
Hi,
Sophia.
Hey.
Okay. Hey.
Let you guys talk here.
Okay, ask away.
Okay, my question is, what techniques might be effective or might be adaptable if you are dealing with a water-based race? And that's the first fight scene I have, are people who are coming out of the water and their techniques do not work on land against somebody who is a land dweller.
Why wouldn't they work?
They don't have as much land strength, first of all. Second, most of their techniques might be on pushing off and then colliding, as opposed, a punch isn't going to do much underwater, I think.
No, you would want to do wrestling. You would want to attack joints, and you'd want to choke.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that is very helpful. And somebody under my question had asked a question about aerial fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
okay. But did I give you a good enough answer for the water thing?
Yeah, wrestling is actually really helpful.
Yeah, you're going to want to stay close to them. It's actually going to be a lot of jujitsu type stuff, or the great thing about jujitsu is it kind of happens in a sphere. It can happen at all angles. But strikes aren't going to work. So you need to attack chokes and joints. As far as aerial fighting, wings or no wings, that makes a difference.
I will go to their question.
So here's what they said. What about aerial fights where combatants have wings and are using a combination of weapons and martial arts?
Okay.
Sky fighting.
Sky fighting. Okay. The wings are kind of a big deal because they are going to get in the way to a certain extent. So, when you're flying towards somebody, to strike somebody, you need force, and force is mass times acceleration. Okay, you're going to have the acceleration from flight, and you're going to be getting your mass in that. If you are just hovering, standing still, you are not going to have as much ability to create force, because from standing still in midair, you're not going to be able to get mass. You'll get acceleration, but you won't be able to get the mass behind it. When you're on the ground, the pivot with your feet is what helps you get your mass behind your acceleration. Well, in the air, you don't have that. So if you are in flight, obviously you are going to be able to do strikes. But I mean, take a hint from birds of prey. They come at each other and they kind of are in front of each other. And that might be what I would do. I would get in close to the person. And again, I would go for eyes. I would go for throats. You could also, I'm not sure how their wings are, but there are certain feathers that are pretty crucial, like with birds. There's certain feathers that really help with the directionality and all that. I mean, they can still fly, but I think it's those far finger feathers on the end that really help with direction. People who are ornithologists chime in here. But you could definitely attack those wings too. And I don't know what kind of weaponry you're using. I think I'd be going for those. If I'm close, I'm going for the eyes. I personally would not strike, because when you are flying, obviously to be a flying creature, I wonder if your bones are like everybody else's, or if their bones are especially light, kind of like birds are. But as fast as you could fly, I really don't feel like the bones of the hand, if they are like humans, are going to be able to. There's another group that has energy-based wings. Okay, but what we're looking at is their build, their bones. And I don't care, even if they're bones like humans, if they're flying and they strike somebody, I don't know that their bones are going to be able to support that force. And I think that's going to lead to some breaking. And so I would kick more than anything, like fly at them and then kick with the feet. I know that's not as dramatic, but I would definitely go for the eyes. I would go for the throat. I would make it count. And I would go for the wings too. I hope that helps.
Carla, this is Terrence, and he's the one with the aerial fighting question.
Okay.
I'm wondering if he has a follow-up question for us.
Is that hitting true to what you're talking? Is that hitting true for you? Is that working?
Yeah, I think so, because I have an avian race that definitely, they're almost sort of bird-like in some ways. And so, yeah, that makes sense as far as going to be a lighter skeletal structure and that kind of thing. A lot of their weapons are more long reach. type of thing. So you're talking about like javelins, lances, bow and arrow, a long sword, things of that sort when they're really in, you know. So then my follow-up question would be, in this fantasy that I've written, one of the main characters is actually a human from our world that's transported to another world. And so when he's fighting these types of creatures, he finds that he can manifest certain powers, one of them being flight, but it's energy, like, his wings are like energy based, but his skeletal structure is going to be denser. And there are certain martial arts that have been trained in here on Earth, but I'm wondering, like, would that give him any advantage, or would he be more at a disadvantage because he is going to be more of a denser being against someone who has a lighter skeletal structure?
Well, I mean, because his wings are energy based, it may not matter. If they were feather based, I think it would be an issue. I think it's actually going to work to his favor. If those wings can support him, then he is going to be able to create more force because he's going to have more mass behind his strike.
Right.
He's going to have more mass behind his swings and everything like that. But as far as him knowing martial arts, that does nothing but help him. I mean, some of them may not prove as effective. Because, the martial arts we know, they use gravity. They employ gravity and the physics that we know that are gravity based. So, I mean, them being energy based, I'm just curious as to what's going to be the chink in his armor. How do you defeat him? I mean, your reader doesn't have to know, but what defeats him?
His ability to harness energy and power comes directly from his relationship with basically the god of that world. So without that connection, he's basically on his own. So right away, when he first comes to that world, he ends up in a fight where he utterly gets his butt kicked, and almost ends up getting killed. And so it isn't until a little bit later that he's saved. But it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with the intervention of that god character. And so the process in the book is him growing to realize that, hey, I can't just depend on my own ability, and my own strength and stuff like that. There's more,
Right.
So that's kind of where I have it going.
Right. If I were fighting that creature, the other creatures are going to have physics on their side as far as agility and their ability to move quicker because they don't have the mass he does. So they don't have the gravitational pull. And so what I might do is let him come straight at me. And then at the last moment, go up diagonally because that'll get away from the wings. It'll go to the safe area right here. And I would drag a sword over him.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. So more of dodging him.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Yeah.
I did have another question that was right under the previous ladies. And that was when I'm differentiating between martial arts styles in my writing and things like that. In the past, what I've done is I've basically said, okay, they're using this attack, this block, and I'm kind of like choreographing it. And then I read somewhere that one should never do that, that they should basically just say, there's attacking and there's blocking, because the only people who would have any idea what you're talking about is someone who is actually martial arts trained. Like, what do you say with that? I mean, does it depend on what's going on, or?
Well, I think the only rule of writing is to keep your reader in the story. So first and foremost, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule of what you can include and what you can't include. I think it's a good idea to only include as much as you could see in comic book panels. Because comic book panels, what they do is they show you the fight, but they only show you the most important parts. They only are going to show you those tiny foot movements or tiny hand movements if it's completely changing the scenario. So, you know, a comic book, a full 2-page panel layout may be quite a lengthy fight, but they're only highlighting specific moves. And what's getting even more attention than those moves is you see the face, you see the sweat, you see the call outs with the sounds. And so they try very hard to, even though they are showing you what's happening physically, they're trying to give you a sensory experience. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, I mean, look at Hunger Games. In the very first, no, what Hunger Games? I'm sorry. What's the one that has Triss in it? Where everybody had to be,
Divergent.
Come on, what is it?
Divergent.
Divergent. The very first book, Divergent, had tons of fight stuff in it, and it was block and punch and turn, and it didn't lose me. And at the time I read it, I didn't really have much martial art experience. And it didn't clearly it didn't lose the mass audience because there was 2 more books that followed. But what it did is it always showed Triss's physical reaction to it. And that's what keeps people invested. No, not everybody can relate to being hit in the face, but they can relate when you say that, you know, the eye watered and pain shot through and all that kind of stuff. People relate to pain. So I do think you absolutely can include the strikes and the blocks. Just remember, you're reaching your reader, not teaching your reader. You're not there to teach the reader how to fight, because you're not going to teach anybody how to fight just by reading a book anyway.
Right.
So think about it and say, okay, if I can only do a comic book page panel spread, what are my most important moves here? And more important than that, what's the sensory experience around it? Sometimes you have to show the moves. In The Princess Bride, in the book Inigo and Wesley, the whole time they're having that little duel in the book, it's talking about what they're doing and it's talking about their footwork. And that's because not so much the moves were important, but because they were trying to best each other with their knowledge. It was kind of a show-off situation. So if Morgenstern had followed the rules that you had read, we wouldn't even have that fight scene. So I don't necessarily agree with that. Chuck Palahniuk, the writer of Fight Club, wouldn't agree with that either. Because in his book, people who haven't read that book, they think it's just a huge book full of tons of fight scenes. And it's not. There's 3 main fight scenes in the book. That's it. And he absolutely talks about the punches and he absolutely talks about the blocks. But what he talks about more than that is the sound of the head hitting the cement, the feeling of the knuckles grinding into the teeth and the teeth biting into the cheek. He makes it a sensory experience. So I am not one to follow rules, hard and fast rules for writing, except keep your reader in the game. That's just me. I hope that answered the question. Sometimes I don't answer the question. If I'm not answering the question, be sure to tell me you didn't answer the question.
No, I think that was fantastic. I love the idea of the comic book panels. I've never heard anyone say that before, but that's like a visual prompt you can use for, you know, this is how in-depth you want to be. This is what you need to convey and get across.
I was doing a video and I mentioned something about, and I was looking at comic book panels and I'm like, hey, because I love comic books. I grew up with comic books, and you do have tons of action sequences, but they're very judicious with what they choose to show. And I think it's a good guidance for us too. It works for me.
The next question I was going to bring up was for Deborah Lawrence. Tell you what her question is, and then we can ask her follow-up question. She says, how would a very primitive war between children and parents be described?
The children are drugged. They don't really know their parents, but their parents know that they are their children, even though they've never seen them before.
How old are they?
They're all ages.
Oh, okay. So you have elementary through high school?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So, and they would only have probably primitive weapons, maybe clubs or something like that.
Okay. All right. So you have,
but not the parents won't want to fight them at all.
Okay.
So I think they'd be very reluctant. So it would only be, I think, defending themselves, maybe.
Well, it depends on if it's your kid or not. I mean, if it's my kid, I'm going to defend myself. If it's your kid, I'm going to beat his tail because he's trying to beat me.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, you know, when you have a club in your hand, your enemy is your enemy. So I think it would be a good twist when you have parents facing their kids versus facing other people's kids.
Okay.
So that's gonna be a whole other level. But I train with young kids. I say young kids. There's some boys that are like 12 to 15 that I train with that are bigger than me. And something that I have found is they really rely too heavily on speed. They and they're fast. They're young, they're nimble, they're fast. And I think that can be, I think it's their downfall sometimes. But I think those kids are going to be very fast. I think they're going to be much more frenzied than the adults just by their young nature. And but adults, I mean, they do have strength. And I think at the very beginning of the attack, the adults may be hesitant because they're children, but it only takes one good knock to the head to take that out of your system. You know, because like, if I'm sparring against a 12-year-old, I'm like, oh, I feel bad until they choke me. And I'm like, no, I don't feel bad anymore. I don't feel bad at all. So you can have it reluctant to begin with. But yeah, once you get hit, it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. And so these parents have a plan until they get in the face. What the parents have on their side is their ability to control themselves and their ability to work together. Kids just don't do that as well. So, and you've got to use that speed against them. If somebody is using speed against you, then you need to slow them down. If somebody is using slowness against you, you need to speed them up. So the good thing about the kids, you know, you can grab them around the arms. How violent are you wanting this to be? Are you wanting kids? Do you want nobody hurt? That's not realistic.
No, they're going to get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
There might be some killing, but it's going to be tragic.
Yeah. So how much are they just regular suburban parents? Are they parents that have some type of training or?
No, they're not.
Do they live in a primitive society?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do they live in a primitive society?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Do they butcher their own animals?
Yes.
Okay, then they know how to kill stuff.
They do.
That is a whole different. Those are what I call country people.
Okay.
And country people know how to take care of themselves for the simple fact they know where the organs and everything are. They work hard, so they are in shape more than they think they're in shape. And I think you have a whole deadlier group of people. So those parents are going to know how to handle those kids better than the kids are going to know how to handle the parents. Okay. But the kids, this is interesting. When you have someone who's much shorter than you run at you full speed and hit you in the hips, it tends to take you down. So, but once they get on the ground, you know, the parents are going to have a certain type of advantage. Am I answering your question?
I think so, yes.
Okay, good. I mean, there's going to be advantages and disadvantages on both sides. But what the kids have against them, and this is what I have found just from sparring people who are young enough to be my children, which I don't feel bad about. They started it. They are so focused on being faster than me that they don't use the technique that they know. They just throw technique out the window and assume that they're going to beat me with speed. And so my job, what I do is I slow them down. I lock them up and slow them down, which frustrates them because I've taken away what they thought was on their side.
Okay.
As far as the clubs and everything, you can deflect a club, but you don't block it. You block a club and you're going to get broken. Something's going to break. So if a club is coming at me, instead of doing a hard like karate block, we were talking about Cobra Kai something earlier. What I'm going to do is as it comes at me, I'm going to swat, which is going to take it to the side. I may still end up breaking my arm. But the best thing to do is to step out of the way of it or deflect it and then go for the throat.
Okay.
I mean, if somebody's using a club against you, the stakes are pretty high when somebody's got something that can kill you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're going to invite Donatello on the screen.
Okay.
And he wants to talk about how to describe animals, including mystical animals fighting.
Good evening, Tara.
Good evening. Number one, Donatello, do you have my book?
No, miss.
No,
I
you don't.
heard you. I heard about you.
There is a whole chapter on fighting beasties.
Of course.
And I do talk about specifically dragons. I have a soapbox about dragons. I did not talk about phoenixes, but an easy thing to kind of go by is relate it to the most realistic creature we have on the planet right now. Okay. A phoenix, obviously, we don't have anything that comes up out of the ashes, but it's basically a huge bird of prey. So you look at what birds of prey do, and then you figure out how to best it. A phoenix, I don't care what a phoenix is doing. If I run into a small area, it can't come after me.
Especially with the idea I have for some particular phoenix in my short story that I'm writing. You see, there are regular phoenix that are like regular birds, like eagles and such like that. Like they're that big. But there are some phoenix, including my queen of the phoenix, that are actually the size of dragons themselves.
Okay.
Which is actually very powerful in a fight against Dragon King.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And which of those do you want to tackle? We can probably only tackle one.
Okay, well, I was kind of hoping for both, like, or just important things, like maybe we'll do like one bird and one with like a minotaur, something like that. Like, how would you describe first how the phoenix would fight a bird that can ignite in flames, and how will you use flames as defensive and offensive, as some creatures?
Okay. Well, first of all, anything that can burst into flames, I'm not going to get close to. Period.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep a buffer.
Dragons.
Huh?
But the phoenix are dealing with dragons, and dragons also deal with have fire themselves.
Oh wait, are the phoenixes phoenix eye?
At war with dragons.
Oh, they're fighting each other.
You see, my short story is literally called "The War of Fire." It's about a legendary battle between dragons.
Okay. All right. Well, what you have there, okay. Obviously, they are going to be using fire against each other, but if one's breathing fire and the other's breathing fire, it might be canceling each other out. I'm not sure how fire works in your work, but what you're going to have is you need to look at videos of raptors, birds of prey fighting. Because they come at each other, and this is something I get on a soapbox about dragons too. Dragons are going to fight like birds of prey. They're going to flap and they're going to come forward with their talons, and it's good because other than its size and its smoke and its fire and its claws, it can't do anything else. Dragons don't generally bite.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, but why? If you can burn somebody to a crisp, what's the point of biting them?
Well, my idea is that they both are very good fire wielders in this world. Mm-hmm. The phoenix not only use fire in offensive and defensive, but they can also use it in beauty and in great arts, as well as using it for weaponry. The dragons, on the other hand, they just use it for obviously destroying things as well as attack and such like that. But they do, however, use their claws and their brute force and strength in battle, as well as they use their fire. So they got some advantage there.
Right.
So I have a question. I like this question, but I'm wondering about phoenixes. Do they really have fire, or do they just burst into flame when they're wanting to regenerate? And like, wouldn't that be like a last chance scenario? Because if you're gonna burst into flame and then have to be born again, it seems like you would come back defenseless.
What's your name again, Miss?
Lisa.
Lisa. Well,
you can call me. You can call me not Carla.
Lisa then. Anyways, you see, in this short story, I'm also describing how the phoenix live and everything. For one, they can ignite in flame anytime they wish. Like they want to, like they're angry or they're going on a defensive or offensive technique, such like that. and they don't rise from the ashes like in stories. I actually made a very interesting way on how they breed and how they hatch. You see, when a baby phoenix hatches from its shell, and a few of my critic writers really like this, when the phoenix shell hatches, a shrieking cyclone of fire it bursts out, and all that's left is just a baby phoenix, but not in the colors of a phoenix you know and love, with the red, orange, and yellow. It's literally a blue phoenix with a black outline on it, because they haven't matured enough to have their legendary heart of fire and everything like that.
So Donatello, let me pause you there for a second, because we are almost out of time.
Okay,
if you
sure.
have, if you had one more thing that you'd like for Carla to clarify in terms of phoenixes fighting, what would it be?
How would a phoenix the size of a dragon, as opposed to my story, would fare against a dragon itself? Like, would they fight like the birds of prey you were describing to Terrence earlier, or would they oppose to different fighting styles with, like a dragon has, 4 appendages, so like claws and such like that, while a phoenix has its talons and its wings of fire that it uses?
Well, I think the advantage that the dragon has there is reach with fire, because you have a phoenix that bursts into flames versus an animal that can project flame. And so the animal that can project flame is going to have a little bit of advantage just of the reach. But it also has to do with the design of their wings and how agile they are in the air. If you have one that's simply more agile, that can come up and behind the other, then you have a whole different fight on your hands. But I do see one advantage of the dragon is that it can project its fire versus being a ball of fire.
I also wonder about the whole scale versus feather. It seems like that would be advantage dragon too. But how much would it be? How much size?
Weight.
Yeah, I was going to say how much does size factor in?
Yeah.
Is it better to be big, or is it better to be small and quick?
Depends on your strategy there. Yeah. And
which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Don't you know the first chicken to have an egg was shocked? I mean, what the heck?
It's
Tough day.
It's true. Well, Carla, thank you so much. I loved this, and I like the fact that we just get to talk with you and brainstorm stories and ask, crazy things about underwater fighting, and what if a dragon and a phoenix fell in the water and had to fight, and they couldn't use flame. Maybe we'll deal with that one next time. Mm-hmm. But okay, guys, there will
be a next time. This is a regular gig for a few months, folks.
Pick up Carla's book in the bookstore. You'll get a signed book plate that you can peel and stick wherever you want on the book.
Stick it wherever the heck you stick
not
it.
On the front. I'm thinking maybe inside the cover. But
we're not, this
anyway,
is in a place of judgment.
Yeah, this is stick it where you want it.
Yeah,
just stick this on my bookshelf.
Yeah, stick it on your bookshelf, lady.
But thank you, everyone. Everybody give love to Carla. Take a screenshot if you haven't already, and post it on social media so everyone can know what they missed. Thank you, Carla.
All righty. Thank you. Y'all have a good night.